The courtroom smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, the kind of smell that clings to every courthouse in America. Another Tuesday morning in Providence. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses, ready for another small case. Parking tickets, late fees, the usual parade of hurried faces. Nothing extraordinary. Until she walked in. A woman in a worn leather jacket, hair pulled into a careless knot, dark circles under her eyes. She carried a crumpled bag of potato chips and sat down noisily, right in front of the bench. She didn't wait to be called. She just started eating. A quiet ripple went through the room, the sound of disbelief. Even the bailiff looked unsure. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Miss Monroe, is it? You decided to have lunch in court today?" She didn't even look up. "I paid for parking. I'm allowed to sit here. Might as well eat while I wait." A few people chuckled, but the judge didn't. His tone stayed calm. "You understand this is a courtroom, not a cafeteria?" She shrugged, tossed another chip in her mouth. "You understand I've been waiting 3 hours?" There was no aggression in her voice, only exhaustion wrapped in sarcasm. Caprio noticed the tremor in her hand, the way she kept her purse clutched tight, as if it held something more valuable than it looked. He looked at the file. Kelly Monroe, 35. Citation for obstructing traffic near a school zone. "Miss Monroe, do you acknowledge the violation?" She gave a half smile, sharp and tired. "I acknowledge that my life's one long violation, sir." The laughter in the gallery died immediately. Even Caprio paused, not from offense, but because he heard something in her tone that didn't belong to defiance. It was the sound of someone who had long stopped expecting kindness. He set the paper down. "Well," he said softly, "maybe this isn't about a traffic ticket after all." Kelly looked up for the first time, meeting his eyes with a mixture of irritation and surprise. "What's it about then?" He gestured toward the crumpled citation in front of him. "Maybe it's about why these rules don't seem to matter to you anymore." She let out a dry laugh. "Because rules only work for people who can afford to follow them." The room fell quiet again. Somewhere near the back, a pen stopped clicking. Caprio didn't interrupt. He simply watched her, the fatigue, the brittle humor, the way she hid pain behind a smirk. "Miss Monroe," he said at last, "I've sat on this bench a long time. I've seen anger, arrogance, even hate. But I don't think that's what I'm looking at right now." Her jaw tightened. "You're looking at someone who's out of time, out of patience, and out of options." He nodded once. "Fair enough." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Caprio leaned back in his chair, his voice steady but warm. "All right, maybe today we start with something small. Not the rules, not the ticket. Just the reason you stopped believing any of this matters." She looked down at the half-empty bag in her hands, fingers trembling slightly. "You don't want my reasons, Judge. They're messy." Caprio's voice was quiet, almost kind. "Messy is fine. The truth usually is." The bailiff shifted his weight, the room still as a held breath. Kelly sighed, her eyes flicking up with weary defiance. "Then you'd better have a big file, because this isn't my only mess." Caprio smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed thoughtful. "Good. Let's take them one at a time." He glanced toward the recorder. "We'll proceed, but not too fast. Some stories deserve to be heard in full." Kelly leaned back, crossing her arms, the faintest trace of a smirk still on her face. But behind it, a crack, a glimpse of something fragile trying not to break. And as Caprio looked down at the ticket again, he realized this wasn't going to be another routine morning. Something in her voice, in her posture, in that defiant bag of chips. It felt like a case that wasn't really about law at all. It was about survival. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Judge Caprio folded his hands on the bench, studying her in silence. The rustle of papers, the hum of the old ceiling fan. Every sound in the courtroom felt louder than it should have. "Miss Monroe," he said finally, "let's start again. Tell me who you are, not what's in this file, but who you are." She looked up sharply. "Why? So you can judge me harder?" "I already have enough to judge," Caprio replied softly. "I'm asking because I want to understand." Kelly gave a short, bitter laugh. "Understand? There's not much to it. I used to own a little coffee shop on Elm Street. Used to being the important part. The pandemic hit, rent doubled, customers vanished, and I was left pouring burnt coffee for myself at 3 a.m. just to stay awake." Her tone was dry, but her hands fidgeted on the table. Caprio didn't write anything. He just nodded for her to continue. After I lost the shop, my husband left too. Said he was done with all the sad faces in the house. 2 kids, no alimony, just a note on the fridge, you'll figure it out. The words landed in the air with a dull thud. I work nights now. Cashier at the gas station on Broad. I sleep about 4 hours a day, if I'm lucky. The rest of the time, I'm chasing bills or chasing my kids. Her voice cracked, but she covered it quickly with another joke. You know, Judge, turns out speeding tickets don't pay themselves, no matter how fast you drive. Even a few people in the gallery smiled. Caprio didn't. His eyes softened, but his tone stayed steady. So the day of the citation, he said, you parked near a school zone. Kelly nodded. I stopped for 3 minutes. My daughter's teacher called, said she couldn't get on the bus without a medical note. I ran in to grab her. By the time I came out, there it was, bright orange ticket flapping in the wind like a flag saying you failed again. Did you try to contest it? She shook her head. Contest it? With what time? Between double shifts and PDA meetings, I barely have time to breathe. Besides, the city doesn't care about stories like mine. They care about numbers. Caprio tilted his head. You think this court doesn't listen to stories like yours? She hesitated. I think people like you have heard too many to care anymore. For the first time, the judge leaned forward. You're wrong. I've heard too many not to. Kelly blinked, thrown off balance. Her sarcasm faltered. Why? You think one sob story's going to change the rules? No, he said gently. But it might remind someone there's still more than their mistakes. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of disbelief, maybe even hope. She quickly masked it with a scoff. Hope's expensive, Judge. I stopped buying it a long time ago. He let the silence stretch. Then, quietly. Is that why you were eating chips in here? Because that's all you can afford? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She nodded once. Lunch for me, dinner for the kids. 2-for-1 deal at the corner store. Can't beat that. The room went still. Even the clerk looked down. Caprio exhaled slowly. You said earlier you don't stop. Maybe that's the problem. Sometimes survival tricks us into thinking motion is progress. She looked at him, almost offended. You want me to stop? Then what? Let it all fall apart? I want you to breathe, he said. That's where fixing things starts. Kelly's eyes filled, but she didn't let a tear fall. You sound like one of those inspirational posters they hang in schools. And yet, Caprio smiled faintly. Those posters are usually right. Her shoulders eased a little, the first hint of release. You really think I'm fixable, Judge? He paused. I think you're tired, not broken. There's a difference. The faintest sound came from her, a shaky laugh that didn't quite know if it was laughter or crying. Caprio reached for his papers again, speaking more softly now. Miss Monroe, this ticket, it's not what concerns me. What concerns me is how many of these you'll collect before you let someone help. She rubbed her palms together. There's no help for people like me. Not true, Caprio said firmly. You're sitting in front of it right now. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain. Her defenses cracked, just a little. Then she said quietly, You're wasting your time, Judge. I've already hit the bottom. Caprio leaned back, his voice steady but kind. Then that's good news, Miss Monroe. She frowned. Good news. Yes, he said. Because from the bottom, the only direction left is up. The gallery sat silent. The hum of the lights seemed to soften. Kelly looked down, blinking fast, then reached into the crumpled chip bag, more out of habit than hunger. But this time she stopped mid-motion, her hand trembling slightly. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe. Caprio nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. We'll see. The law may not feed the hungry, Miss Monroe, but it can still remind them they matter. The gavel didn't fall. He simply let the moment linger, fragile but alive. And for the first time since she'd entered, Kelly Monroe stopped moving. The next morning, the courtroom air felt heavier, like everyone sensed the story wasn't finished. Kelly Monroe sat in the same seat, hands folded this time, the chip bag nowhere in sight. Her face looked calmer, but her eyes told a different story. The exhaustion was still there, just quieter. Judge Caprio took his place, opened her file, and flipped through the pages slowly. Miss Monroe, he began, I took another look at your record last night. There's a pattern here. Kelly tensed. Let me guess. A pattern of bad decisions? Caprio didn't smile. No, a pattern of surviving without help. He turned another page. 6 unpaid tickets over the past 2 years. Not one follow-up. No appeals, no responses. Why? She met his gaze. Because sometimes it's either pay the city or feed your kids. And the city doesn't cry when it's hungry. A faint murmur passed through the room, but Caprio silenced it with a glance. And you never asked for an extension? Payment plan? She shook her head. You don't ask favors from people who already think less of you. He looked down, reading. One of these citations is from the same day a 911 call was made from your street. He glanced up. Do you remember that day? Kelly hesitated. Yeah. A man collapsed outside the grocery store. I tried CPR until the ambulance came. He lived, I think. Caprio nodded slowly. The report says you left your car running in a no-parking zone while you helped him. Her jaw tightened. And they towed it anyway. That drew a quiet gasp from the gallery. Caprio's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Disbelief, then sorrow. Did you tell anyone this? Kelly laughed softly, without humor. Who would care? You think the city clerk's gonna knock $50 off because I try to keep someone breathing? No, Caprio said. But the court might have. She crossed her arms. Doesn't matter. I don't trust courts. Caprio leaned forward, voice lower now. Then why are you here? Because I didn't have a choice, she said. They threatened to suspend my license. He held her stare for a moment. You see, Miss Monroe, that's the thing. People only come here when they run out of choices. And by then, they've forgotten they still have a voice. Her lip trembled, but she kept it steady. My voice doesn't pay rent. No, he said softly. But silence costs more. Kelly looked away. The words hung between them, heavy and uncomfortably true. Caprio closed the folder. You said yesterday you don't believe the system listens to people like you. But I'm listening now. So tell me, why so much anger? Her reply came like a crack in glass. Because every time I think I'm getting ahead, life finds another way to remind me where I belong. He didn't flinch. And where's that? She met his eyes again. Somewhere between broke and invisible. The room went still. Even the bailiff's pen stopped moving. Caprio's voice was nearly a whisper now. You think invisibility protects you, but it's killing you slowly. The world doesn't see you because you stopped letting it. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away this time. Then, softly, you really believe one court hearing can change that? No, Caprio said, but it can start reminding you who you were before you stopped believing. She leaned back, exhaling through her nose. You talk like this isn't just your job. It isn't, he replied simply. It's my duty to remind people that justice isn't about punishment. It's about being seen. For a long moment, neither spoke. The judge shuffled his papers, then looked up again. Miss Monroe, he said quietly, I'm going to call a short recess. Not because this case needs it, but because you do. She blinked, caught off guard. You're serious? I am, he said. And when we resume, I want you to tell me what really happened the day you got that ticket. All of it. Kelly hesitated, then nodded once. As she stood to step outside, Caprio added gently. The law records what's written on paper, but justice listens to what's left unsaid. The bailiff opened the door. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the hall, steady but uncertain. Inside the courtroom, Caprio exhaled and looked down at the file one more time. There was something deeper here, something the paperwork couldn't capture. He knew it now. This wasn't about fines or parking spots. It was about a woman trying to exist in a world that kept erasing her. When the court reconvened after recess, the air was thick with anticipation. The murmurs faded as Judge Caprio returned to the bench, his face calm but unreadable. He glanced at the papers in front of him, then at Kelly Monroe, who sat rigidly, fingers entwined, eyes fixed on the table. I took some time to verify a few things, he began slowly. And I found something remarkable. A faint rustle moved through the room. Kelly didn't lift her head. The day you received that citation near the school, Caprio continued, a 911 call was logged from that exact location. The report says a woman matching your description performed CPR on a man who had collapsed on the sidewalk until emergency services arrived. That man lived. He paused. Miss Monroe, that woman was you, wasn't it? Kelly finally looked up, startled but composed. I didn't think it mattered. Caprio tilted his head. Didn't matter? You saved a life. Her answer was quiet, steady. I didn't want it to sound like an excuse. I just did what anyone should have done. Caprio studied her carefully. There was no arrogance in her tone, only the quiet dignity of someone who had carried too much alone for too long. That's not cynicism I hear, he said softly. That's fatigue and pride. She gave a faint, humorless smile. Maybe both. You spend enough time trying to survive, you forget what the difference is. He turned another page, eyes narrowing slightly. Do you know who that man was? Kelly shook her head. David Hale, the judge said. Local business owner. Philanthropist. The kind of person who's used to being on the other side of this bench. For a moment, surprise flickered in her eyes. Then she laughed quietly. Of course. Figures it'd be someone important. I guess I should have asked for a finder's fee. The courtroom chuckled, but Caprio didn't. His voice dropped lower. You saved a man who could have changed your circumstances in an instant. Yet you didn't use his name, didn't seek recognition, didn't even mention it here. Why? Kelly exhaled, long and slow. Because I didn't save him for what he could do for me. I didn't ask anyone to save me when everything fell apart. So why should I expect thanks? Caprio leaned forward, his gaze steady. You always stand up for others, don't you? But never for yourself. She looked away, her voice a whisper. I wouldn't know how anymore. The silence that followed was the kind that filled the whole room, pressing on everyone's chest. Caprio didn't speak immediately. He just watched her, the way her guard trembled for the first time. Finally, he said, Miss Monroe, I'm going to request Mr. Hale's presence in this court. He deserves the chance to confirm what you did. Her reaction was instant, sharp, almost panicked. No, please don't. I don't want him to see me like this. Caprio's tone stayed calm. And why not? She swallowed. Because people like him, they see a woman like me and think, poor thing. I don't want his pity. The judge's expression softened. Maybe he doesn't want to offer pity. Maybe he wants to offer gratitude. Kelly shook her head, gripping the edge of the table. Gratitude fades. Pity lasts forever. Caprio let the words linger before replying quietly. You may be wrong about that. He turned toward the clerk. Fine, Mr. David Hale. Tell him I'd like to speak with him personally about this case. Kelly's voice came again, barely above a whisper. Judge, please let it go. But Caprio's decision was final, his tone gentle but firm. Miss Monroe, for once in your life, allow someone to stand for you. She didn't answer. Her shoulders slumped as if the fight had finally drained out of her. The judge watched her in silence. Then, softly, you've spent years proving you don't need help. Maybe it's time to prove you deserve it. The gavel didn't fall. The moment didn't end. Instead, it hung there, suspended between pride and mercy, between the woman who refused to ask and the world that had finally decided to notice her. The next morning, the courtroom filled before the doors even opened. News had spread. The man Kelly Monroe had saved was coming. When David Hale entered, the sound of his shoes against the tile echoed louder than it should have. He was tall, neatly dressed, but his face carried the kind of humility that doesn't belong to a man used to being in control. He took the stand without ceremony. Yes, he said before the judge could even ask, that's her. She saved my life. Kelly didn't look up. Her hands stayed folded tight on her lap. Caprio nodded. Tell us what happened, Mr. Hale. David's voice wavered just slightly. I collapsed outside the grocery store. Heart attack. I remember. Her face first. She didn't hesitate. Everyone else froze, but she didn't. He looked toward her then. When I woke up in the hospital, they said a woman had kept me alive until help came. I tried to find her for months. The judge leaned forward. And how did you find out she was here today? I saw a clip online, he admitted. A woman eating chips in court. People were mocking her. Then I recognized her eyes. Kelly flinched. Caprio's tone softened. Why was it important for you to come? David took a breath. Because I heard she was living in her car when that happened. And I couldn't stand knowing that someone who gave me life had no place to live hers. The words seemed to strike something deep in the room. Kelly's face stayed still, but her throat tightened. I'm no hero, she said finally, her voice hoarse. I just happened to be there. David smiled faintly. Then maybe we both got lucky that day. Caprio's eyes moved between them. Miss Monroe, you said yesterday you don't believe the system listens to people like you. Well, it just did. He opened the folder again, tapping one page. You have one remaining fine, unpaid, with penalties. Quite a sum. Then he looked at David. Mr. Hale, if you could thank her properly, what would you do? David's answer came without hesitation. I already did. I paid every debt attached to her name this morning. The courtroom gasped. Kelly froze. You what? It wasn't charity, David said quietly. It was gratitude. Caprio checked the file, then confirmed it. Payment cleared. Kelly pressed a trembling hand to her face. I didn't want help, she whispered. I know, David said gently. You wanted to disappear. But people who save lives don't get to vanish. For a moment, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Kelly looked up at him. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, he replied. You gave me a second chance. Now I'm giving it back. Caprio closed the folder slowly. Miss Monroe, your case is resolved. But more than that, so is your sentence against yourself. Kelly's eyes glistened. I never asked for a miracle, Judge. He smiled softly. You didn't need to. You became one. And with that, the gavel struck once. Not as an ending, but as the sound of something beginning again. When the courtroom began to empty, Judge Caprio didn't rise right away. He stayed seated, watching the small crowd file out. Reporters whispering, people wiping their eyes, the echo of footsteps fading like a slow heartbeat. Then he spoke. Everyone, please remain for just a moment. His tone carried no authority this time, only warmth. The people stopped, uncertain, and Kelly Monroe froze halfway to the door. I want to say something, Caprio continued. Not as a judge, but as a man who spent most of his life watching others stand where you stand now. Kelly turned slightly, unsure whether to stay or go. When we see someone break a rule, he said, we rarely stop to ask why. We assume defiance, carelessness, guilt. But sometimes, behind the why, there's a story so human, it reminds us the law may be blind, but justice should never be deaf. The room was utterly silent. He turned toward Kelly. Miss Monroe, I've met hundreds who came here with excuses. You came with truth, raw, bruised, and unpolished. And you didn't hide it, even when it hurt to tell. Kelly swallowed, trying to speak, but no words came. Caprio continued, quieter now. You've been punished enough by circumstance. Still, justice means responsibility. So here's what I'm going to do. You will serve 20 hours of community service at the Hope Center, the shelter for single mothers. She blinked, surprised. Community service? He nodded. Not as punishment, as proof. Proof that what you've endured can help someone else survive their own storm. Teach them that even when everything falls apart, kindness still rebuilds. Kelly exhaled slowly. For the first time, her expression wasn't weary, it was calm. You really think I have something to teach? I think, Caprio said, smiling, that people listen to those who've lived the hard parts already. A few people in the gallery nodded. Someone whispered, Amen. David Hale, still standing by the bench, looked at her. If you need supplies for that center, he said quietly, my company will provide them. Kelly shook her head, though a tear escaped anyway. You don't owe me anything. I know, he replied gently. But sometimes gratitude deserves action. Caprio folded his hands. Miss Monroe, you once said you didn't believe the system listens to people like you. But today, the whole city heard you. Don't forget what that feels like. Kelly hesitated, then took a step toward him. Her voice wavered, but carried across the room. You know, Judge, I don't eat in court anymore. The corners of his mouth lifted. Eat, Miss Monroe. Just do it without guilt. The courtroom laughed softly, not mockery this time, but release. Caprio's eyes softened as he looked around. What happened here today isn't about fines or mercy. It's about reflection. Justice isn't a hammer, it's a mirror. And when we dare to look into it, sometimes we see not punishment, but possibility. He rose slowly, gathering his papers. This court is adjourned, he said. But his voice carried something gentler than finality. And for once, that doesn't mean the end. Kelly stood motionless for a beat, then turned toward the door. David offered a small nod as she passed. She managed a faint smile, the first real one anyone in that room had seen from her. Outside, the morning light hit her face. It wasn't the harsh glare of the courtroom or the cold fluorescence of long nights at work. It was clean, honest daylight. She paused on the courthouse steps, pulling a small bag of chips from her pocket. She looked at it for a second, then laughed quietly to herself and dropped it into a nearby trash can. Behind her, the courtroom door clicked shut, and in the narrator's voice, low, steady, reflective, the thought lingered. Sometimes, the loudest sound in a courtroom isn't the gavel or the crowd. It's the quiet crackle of a bag of chips, reminding us that everyone who walks through those doors, no matter how broken, still has the right to be human. The sound of the city rose again. Cars, footsteps, wind, life continuing. And somewhere in that rhythm, a woman named Kelly Monroe began hers anew.